Throughout the novel Bless Me Ultima, Anaya expresses how the dual nature that human beings often project may cause misunderstanding between individuals and eventually confrontation can occur. On page 20, ironically, the man perceived as a town drunk is seen as the only sensible one among the town's mob that is portraying qualities of bloodthirsty animals. In Narciso's case, the sign normally seen by others is unfortunately the sign the public cannot handle and he falls subject to misconception. Often, throughout society, if someone resembles normal behavior with one crowd and different behavior with another crowd, they will often be marked socially as conniving or two-faced. This belief is confirmed because everyone has different opinions of what is socially acceptable, and these personal opinions be formed with the influence of television, magazines, and people in our everyday lives can stir up conflicting opinions between individuals. Often, people can appear to project different parts of their personality based on the setting they are placed in. The quote is, "You all know Lupido. You know the war made him sick." But the men would not listen to Narciso. I guess it was because he was the town drunk and he never said anything useful. Page 20. When a baby is born, they are influenced by the people around them, and as they grow and develop, often events that occur in their lives shape their personalities, sometimes positive or negative, and sometimes both. In Lupido's and Narciso's case, in the heat of passion, their true inner characters come out, which is a crazed man that lost himself and his mind in the war, and the man that usually drinks to forget trauma is turned into a sensible man and a caring friend. Both men struggle immensely with their personal lives, but both handle their situation differently. In Narciso's situation, he steps up in an attempt to save a friend, and in Lupido's case, he is submitted into his war-crazed thoughts and gave up on himself because he simply saw nothing worth fighting for. Throughout the novel, Anaya uses the literary technique of juxtaposition to compare and contrast differences between both subjects and both people. For example, Rosie's house and the church, or Narciso and the town's mob. The quote is, "You know," he addressed the men, "my brother did no harm. Tonight an animal crawled behind him and took his life. You call that reason? The animal has to be destroyed." See, the men said in unison. "At least let us try and talk to him," Narciso begged. I knew it was hard for a man of the Llano to beg. Anaya chooses to contrast Narciso and the town's mob because the majority of the time Narciso is treated as a social outcast due to a drinking addiction and is hardly recognized because his methods of coping with his personal problems are just not right. Like Narciso, the town's mob is also acting in a socially unacceptable way while reaping a significant amount of havoc on the town's injustice. Ironically, while the mob searches for Lupido, they perceive him as a cowardice animal that does not deserve the privilege of living, but as they describe him as inhuman, they are also resembling ruthless beast-like behavior. Both show their true colors when a series of unfortunate events occur, thus exposing the side not normally seen by others. As Rodolfo Anaya goes in depth of the struggles humans go through, he expresses this duel we go through as good versus evil since birth. When we develop into human beings, our minds go through many changes that we are not always aware of until someone points it out. These changes we go through every day until the day we die are sometimes good, like growing up and maturing, and a bad change would be like the sudden urge to rebel. Narciso and Lupido were once normal children. They both grew intellectually and matured to the best of their abilities. Usually throughout society, when someone consumes alcohol compulsively, they do this to escape their own thoughts and reality. This is clearly illustrated through Narciso. In Lupido's case, as he left his quiet hometown and entered into the violent, tragic world of war. As humans, we are given the gift of compassion, and we are also capable of making and retaining memories, sometimes good, and other times bad. These memories never leave us. When Lupido went off to war, he witnessed so many devastating scenes that traumatized him and eventually drove him mad, and unfortunately he could not cope with the pain of his very own mind. Eventually, the maturity we undergo throughout our lives distinguish us from everyone else, and events that happen throughout our lives also shape our personalities and how we cope with these damages and how we cope with these changes and what either makes us sane or insane, like Lupido or Narciso. As Anaya writes about the duality our minds go through, he also lists some more examples of juxtaposition, like Rosie's house, where young women sell their bodies to lustful men, and the church, where Antonio seeks answers from a God that works silently rather than voice all of his opinions. In Rosie's house, acceptance from women and freedom from society's rules is sought, but ironically, guilt, regret, addiction, and disappointment is found. In the church, forgiveness from God is sought but a significant portion of the time, along with the silence, the feeling of insignificance is found. The church and Rosie's house are constantly at war because they are completely opposite of one another. While the church was created for the sole purpose for those who seek enlightenment, the duality against Rosie's house is present because its sole purpose was to rebel against society and the church. Both of these locations serve as a symbol for Antonio, and as he grows every day, his struggles do the same. As his innocence fades away, the temptation of the worldly pleasures invade him. As Antonio continues to choose between the two paths he is caught in the middle of, he thinks of his loved ones while contemplating his own salvation. The quote is, "We drove past Rosie's house, and I thought about the sins of the town and how the golden carp would punish the sinners." Page 137. This page shows a darker side to Antonio's subconscious. It appears like Antonio is emitting resentfulness towards God because he feels like God has not communicated the plan for his future clearly yet. While Antonio lets out his frustration, he still remains completely aware of the punishment that sinners undergo. He lets the reader know that the topic of religion has been weighing heavily on his mind. Rosie's house automatically strikes Antonio as evil because he sees the women as if they are sacrificing their souls while lacking any morals. He dislikes his house so much because it completely goes against everything he believes in and makes him question whether there is a God or not. Since the beginning of Antonio's life, his father and his mother's will have been chosen over his very own. This causes much of his internal conflict. Antonio, being much closer to his mother rather than his father, adapts to the church more than the farmer lifestyle in the novel. The quote is, "Then we passed the church, and I thought of the God's punishment for the sinners. He cast them into the burning pit of hell where they will burn for eternity." Page 137. For Antonio, he sees Rosie's house as the ultimate temptation that he should avoid at all costs. He sees the church as what keeps him off from falling. He sees the church as what keeps him from falling off the path to enlightenment. The source of Antonio's confusion are both religions he is at odds with. The first lunar priest was the man who originated this conflict because he took and bent the rules of celibacy while participating in priesthood. By the first lunar priest giving into temptation and creating a family, he was already seen as unfit to guide others. But defying the odds, he maintains a balance between two very different lifestyles throughout his life, not knowing that his decisions will affect everyone in the town's future. Both of these passages on page 20 and 137 portray good examples of the duality both subjects endure. For example, Narciso in reality is a good-hearted man perceived as a stereotypical drunk. The town's mob is perceived as the protectors of the town, but in reality they cause a great deal of bloodshed. Rosie's house is seen as the pit of the town where temptation is at its very highest, and the church where people dedicate their faith to a higher power. Ironically, the first lunar priest triggers the dysfunction and the duality of the good versus evil in this small town. He created this insanity by taking completely different styles and combining them into one. All of these people and objects play an important role in Antonio's mind and people in the town's mind. All of these objects are subjects to misinterpretation, but people judge by what they see and hear rather than what is always true.